The word prostituta had never sounded so ugly in Carmen Rodriguez's native Spanish until Antonio screamed at her while his fist connected with her jaw. She'd taught that word countless times to her students back in Havana. Prostitute, feminine noun, something distant and academic. Now, locked in the back room of what was supposed to be Miami's most prestigious language school, Carmen learned that some words cut deeper when they became your identity rather than your vocabulary lesson. 6 months earlier, everything had seemed like divine intervention. Carmen had been teaching high school Spanish in Havana for 12 years, watching her salary shrink while inflation devoured her dreams. When the email arrived from International Language Academy in Miami, offering her a prestigious position teaching Spanish to American professionals, she'd read it 3 times before believing it was real. The salary was 10 times what she earned in Cuba. The visa sponsorship was legitimate. The opportunity felt like answered prayers. The application process had been thorough, professional. Director Antonio Morales had conducted video interviews that lasted hours, testing her teaching methods, her accent, her cultural knowledge. He'd praised her Peninsula Spanish pronunciation, calling it exactly what our corporate clients demand. The academy specialized in business Spanish for executives, he explained, and needed native speakers who could teach proper Castilian pronunciation and formal register. Carmen's university education and teaching credentials made her perfect for their exclusive clientele. Her arrival in Miami had been everything she'd imagined American opportunity would be. Antonio himself met her at the airport, a distinguished man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit and speaking elegant Spanish with a slight Argentine accent. He drove her through neighborhoods that looked like movie sets, palm trees lining perfect streets, luxury cars gleaming in driveways, prosperity visible in every detail. This was the America she dreamed of, the place where talent and hard work were rewarded. The apartment he'd arranged was in a complex called Villa Rosa, marketed to young professionals. Carmen's unit was modest but clean, furnished with everything she needed to start her new life. Antonio explained that first month's rent and deposits were covered by the academy as part of her relocation package. He handed her keys with a warm smile, telling her to rest for the weekend before beginning work on Monday. Everything felt legitimate, generous, exactly what a reputable institution will provide for international faculty. The International Language Academy building was impressive from the outside, a renovated Art Deco structure in downtown Miami with the school's name etched in elegant lettering across the facade. Inside, the lobby featured marble floors, leather furniture, and framed certificates from various educational accrediting bodies. Promotional brochures showed diverse students in business attire learning Spanish for global commerce. Carmen felt proud to be associated with such a prestigious institution. Her first week had been orientation and curriculum planning. Antonio introduced her to the teaching methodology, emphasizing the importance of personalized instruction for their high-paying clients. Corporate executives, he explained, demanded flexibility in scheduling and location. Many preferred private lessons in their offices or homes rather than traditional classroom settings. The Academy's reputation was built on accommodating these preferences, providing white-glove service to busy professionals. Carmen's first student seemed exactly as described. Robert Chun, a tech entrepreneur expanding his business to Latin America. Sarah Williams, a lawyer whose firm represented Spanish-speaking clients. David Park, a financial advisor with wealthy Latino customers. They were polite, motivated, and paid premium rates for her expertise. Carmen felt valued in ways she'd never experienced in Cuba's underfunded education system. But small details began bothering her after the first month. Students sometimes requested lessons at odd hours, 10 p.m., midnight, even later. When she expressed concern about the scheduling, Antonio explained that executives often worked unconventional hours, taking meetings across time zones. If she wanted to succeed in America, she needed to adapt to American business culture. The money was certainly worth the inconvenience. She was earning more in a week than she'd made in months in Cuba. The requests became stranger gradually. Clients wanted lessons in hotel rooms rather than offices, claiming it was more private for confidential business discussions. Some asked her to dress more formally. Executive presentation, Antonio called it, providing specific outfits that seemed expensive but inappropriate for teaching. When Carmen questioned these requirements, Antonio became cold, reminding her of her visa status and how difficult it would be to find another sponsor. The turning point came on a Tuesday evening in October. Carmen arrived at the luxury hotel where client Michael Thompson had requested a lesson, only to find him wearing nothing but a bathrobe. When she tried to leave, he blocked the door, explaining that he'd paid for private Spanish instruction and expected full service for his money. Carmen's protest confused him. Didn't she understand what kind of business the academy really ran? That night, Carmen discovered the truth about International Language Academy. Antonio didn't just recruit teachers. He recruited women to service clients who paid for more than language instruction. The prestigious school was a front for an escort operation that marketed itself to wealthy men seeking exotic experiences with educated Latin women. Carmen's teaching credentials hadn't made her valuable as an educator. They'd made her valuable as a high-end sex worker. Confronting Antonio the next morning resulted in the beating that taught Carmen new meanings for familiar words. He explained her situation with terrifying clarity. Her visa was sponsored by the academy, making her presence in America dependent on his goodwill. Her apartment lease was guaranteed by the school, leaving her homeless without his approval. The clients who'd seemed so professional were actually paying customers who expected complete compliance with their requests. Carmen's attempts to refuse were met with escalating threats. Antonio showed her photographs of her family in Havana, her elderly mother, her teenage nephew, her sister's children walking to school. He had connections in Cuba. He explained, people who could make life very difficult for families of troublesome employees. If Carmen wanted her relatives to remain safe, she would fulfill her obligations to the academy's clients. The system was designed for complete control. Carmen was moved from her apartment to a house in Coral Gables where other teachers lived under similar circumstances. Elena from Colombia, supposedly hired to teach Portuguese. Luz from Venezuela, recruited for French instruction. Sophia from Argentina, brought in for Italian lessons. None of them had taught their assigned languages a single day since arriving in Miami. The house operated like a luxury prison. Beautiful furnishings, gourmet food, designer clothes, everything except freedom. Security cameras monitored every room except the bathrooms. The doors were controlled electronically, requiring codes that only management possessed. Women who tried to leave without permission faced punishment that became increasingly severe with each attempt. Carmen's first client after her beating was an elderly businessman who spoke to her entirely in broken Spanish, clearly believing she was a prostitute who happened to speak his target language. He'd paid extra for the educational role play, finding excitement in the fantasy of corrupting a schoolteacher. Carmen performed as required, mechanically conjugating verbs while he violated her body, learning that humiliation had its own conjugations in any language. The clients became a parade of men who fetishized intelligence, education, and ethnicity. They wanted to degrade teachers, professors, professionals, women whose minds they respected just enough to make breaking them more satisfying. Carmen was forced to play different roles. The innocent educator, the sultry tutor, the desperate immigrant willing to do anything for papers. Each performance chipped away at her sense of self. Antonio's control extended beyond physical imprisonment. He monitored the women's communications, allowing only supervised phone calls home. Carmen had to lie to her family, maintaining the fiction that she was thriving as a respected teacher in America. Her mother's pride in her daughter's success became another chain binding Carmen to silence. How could she destroy her family's joy with the truth of her situation? The other women had been trapped for varying lengths of time. Elena had been at the house for 2 years, her spirit broken by repeated escape attempts that ended in savage beatings. Sophia had arrived 8 months ago, still harboring hopes that someone would notice her disappearance and investigate. Luz was newest after Carmen, having discovered too late that her modeling contract in Miami was as fake as Carmen's teaching position. They shared stories during brief moments when surveillance was less intense. All had been recruited through similar methods, legitimate seeming opportunities, professional interviews, proper documentation. All had discovered the truth only after arriving in Miami, when backing out meant deportation, homelessness, or worse. Antonio specialized in targeting educated women, whose credentials made them valuable commodities in his upscale operation. The teaching facade continued for the client's entertainment. Carmen was forced to prepare actual lesson plans, create educational materials, design curricula for men who had no intention of learning Spanish. The perverse attention to detail made the humiliation worse. She had to maintain professional standards while being sexually exploited, creating cognitive dissonance that made resistance seem impossible. Some clients preferred the role play to be elaborate. They wanted full lessons before demanding sexual services, enjoying the corruption of academic settings. Carmen found herself actually teaching grammar while wearing lingerie, explaining subjunctive conjugations while being groped, conducting vocabulary drills that inevitably led to degrading sexual acts. Her education became a tool for others' perverse entertainment. Antonio rotated clients to prevent the women from forming relationships that might lead to rescue. No client saw the same woman more than a few times, ensuring that emotional connections couldn't develop. This also protected the operation from investigation. Clients had no sustained contact with any individual woman, making it difficult for them to notice signs of coercion or report concerns to authorities. The women's documents were held by management, officially for safekeeping, but actually prevent independent movement. Without passports, visas, or identification, they couldn't access services, open bank accounts, or prove their legal status to potential helpers. They existed in a bureaucratic limbo, where their documentation was simultaneously their ticket to America and their prison within it. Carmen's attempt to signal distress during client encounters were met with swift retaliation. After she tried to slip a note to a hotel worker, Antonio forced her to watch security footage of her nephew leaving school in Havana, demonstrating how easily surveillance could become stalking. The message was clear. Her family's safety depended on her absolute compliance with client demands. The house operated on a point system that rewarded compliance and punished resistance. Women who satisfied clients without complaint earned privileges like longer phone calls home or occasional supervised outings. Those who caused problems faced isolation, reduced food, or beatings that left no visible marks. Carmen learned to calculate every action against potential consequences for herself and her family. Education became Carmen's private rebellion. In her locked room at night, she mentally prepared real lesson plans, designing curricula she would never teach, conjugating verbs she would never share with genuine students. Teaching had been her identity before this nightmare began, and preserving that knowledge felt like preserving herself. Even if she never escaped, part of her would remain a teacher. The other women coped through different strategies. Elena wrote poetry on scraps of paper, hiding verses throughout the house. Sophia sang quietly to herself, maintaining her voice even when hope failed. Lou sketched with stolen pencils, drawing memories of Venezuela on any available surface. These small acts of creativity were acts of resistance, proof that their spirits hadn't been completely broken. Client demands escalated over time, as men grew bored with standard services and sought more extreme experiences. Carmen was forced to learn phrases in multiple languages, not for communication, but for performing specific degrading acts that clients requested in their native tongues. She became fluent in humiliation across language barriers, understanding commands in English, French, German, Italian that no textbook had ever taught. The physical toll was matched by psychological damage. Carmen began experiencing dissociation during encounters, mentally separating from her body while clients used her. She developed elaborate fantasy worlds where she was still teaching in Havana, still respected, still whole. These mental escapes became necessary for survival, but also made her question what was real and what was constructed to preserve sanity. Antonio occasionally brought new women to house, and Carmen was expected to help with their orientation, explaining the rules, demonstrating compliance, serving as an example of successful adaptation. This forced participation in others' entrapment added guilt to her emotional burden. She was simultaneously victim and unwilling accomplice, helping perpetuate the system that imprisoned them all. Some clients specifically requested teachers, finding the academic credentials arousing. They wanted to hear about Carmen's education, her former students, her teaching methods, not from genuine interest, but from a desire to corrupt intellectual achievement. These men found satisfaction in reducing educated women to sexual objects, deriving power from the contrast between mind and degradation. The holidays were particularly cruel, as clients sought special services, while the women were forced to maintain happy facades during supervised calls home. Carmen had to describe imaginary Thanksgiving celebrations and Christmas parties at the non-existent school, creating elaborate lies about American traditions while trapped in a house where every day was the same nightmare disguised with different clients. Carmen's Spanish deteriorated in subtle ways, as words became associated with trauma rather than communication. Certain phrases triggered panic attacks. Specific vocabulary brought back memories of particular clients. Her native language was being poisoned by its association with forced performances, making even private thoughts feel contaminated by the experience. The women developed a careful code for communicating when surveillance was heaviest. Innocent-seeming conversations about food, weather, or memories contained hidden messages about client behavior, escape possibilities, and emotional support. This secret language became their lifeline, proving that human connection could survive even the most oppressive circumstances. Time blurred into an endless cycle of preparation, performance, and recovery. Days were marked only by different clients, different demands, different humiliations. Carmen lost track of seasons, holidays, even her own birthday. The outside world became theoretical, something that existed beyond the house, but felt increasingly distant and unreal. The security was sophisticated, but not perfect. Carmen began mapping the electronic locks, timing the camera rotations, studying the guards' patterns. Escape seemed impossible, but planning for it preserved her sanity, giving her mind something to focus on besides the next client's arrival. Even failed hopes were better than no hopes at all. Other women had attempted escapes over the years, according to whispered stories. Some had been caught within hours, facing punishment so severe that details were never shared. Others had simply vanished, whether to freedom or something worse. No one knew. The uncertainty itself served as deterrent, making the known horror of staying seem safer than the unknown consequences of leaving. Carmen's family continued believing in her American success, their pride and excitement during phone calls becoming a unique form of torture. They saved money to visit her in Miami, planned vacations around her teaching schedule, bragged to neighbors about their daughter, the international educator. Every lie she told to protect them also trapped her deeper in the deception. The house maintained its facade even for deliveries and service workers. To outsiders, it appeared to be a luxury boarding house for international students or young professionals. The women were coached on cover stories. They were models, students, or professionals sharing expenses in an expensive city. No one questioned beautiful young women living together in wealthy neighborhoods. Some clients were repeat customers who developed preferences for particular women. Carmen found these regulars more dangerous than random encounters because they began expecting emotional connection alongside physical services. They wanted her to remember their names, pretend affection, simulate relationships that made the exploitation feel more personal and devastating. Antonio's operation was part of a larger network. Carmen discovered through overheard conversations. Other houses existed throughout Miami, each specializing in different demographics. Students, professionals, models, nurses. The teaching house was considered high-end, commanding premium prices for the education fantasy. Carmen's academic credentials made her particularly valuable in this specialized market. The women received medical care only when absolutely necessary, usually from doctors who were clearly paid to ask no questions. Injuries were treated with minimal attention to comfort or recovery time. Illnesses were medicated just enough to maintain the ability to work. Their bodies were maintained like any valuable equipment. Functional, profitable, but ultimately replaceable. Carmen began experiencing symptoms she recognized as trauma responses: insomnia, panic attacks, dissociation, depression. But acknowledging these problems felt dangerous, as weakness might reduce her value or increase punishment. She had to appear mentally stable while psychologically fragmenting, maintaining performance quality while her identity dissolved. The education she'd once cherished became a source of pain. Memories of inspiring students, of seeing comprehension dawn in young faces, of feeling respected for her knowledge. These recollections contrasted so sharply with her current reality that they felt like another person's life. The teacher she'd been seemed to have died somewhere between Havana and Miami. Carmen's relationship with Spanish became complex and painful. The language that had been her profession, her art, her identity was now the tool of her exploitation. She began dreaming in English, thinking in fragments, avoiding Spanish phrases that triggered memories of particular clients. Her native tongue was being systematically corrupted by association with trauma. The house operated with business-like efficiency that made the horror more surreal. Schedules were maintained, records were kept, standards were enforced. The women were inventory in a well-organized operation that prioritized profit over humanity. This systematic approach to exploitation was somehow more frightening than random violence would have been. Carmen noticed that newer arrivals adapted more quickly to the situation, suggesting that Antonio's recruitment methods were becoming more sophisticated. The newer women seemed less shocked by the reality, as if they'd been prepared gradually rather than trapped suddenly. This evolution in technique made rescue seem even more unlikely. The psychological manipulation was constant and subtle. The women were told they were fortunate to be in such a high-class operation, that other trafficking situations were far worse, that they should be grateful for their relative luxury. This comparison to greater horrors was designed to suppress resistance and create perverse gratitude for their beautiful prison. Carmen's attempts to maintain dignity became increasingly difficult as clients demanded more extreme performances. She was forced to participate in scenarios that violated every boundary she tried to preserve. The gradual erosion of limits was designed to break down resistance completely, making compliance with any demand seem like the only option for survival. As months passed, Carmen realized that escape would require more than physical freedom. She would need to reconstruct her identity, rebuild her relationship with her native language, reclaim her sense of self as an educator. The damage went far beyond her current imprisonment, extending to the core of who she'd been before Antonio's lies brought her to Miami. The other women had different timelines for hope and despair. Some maintained optimism longer. Others accepted defeat more quickly. Carmen found herself somewhere in the middle, cycling between determination and resignation depending on the day's particular cruelties. This emotional variability felt like another symptom of her fractured mental state. 2 years after her arrival in Miami, Carmen remained trapped in the house, her dreams of teaching American students replaced by nightmares of serving their predatory desires. The International Language Academy continued operating its dual existence, a prestigious school by day, a trafficking center by night. Her teaching diploma still hung in the reception area, marketing material for men who paid premium prices to corrupt educators. The word professora, teacher, had joined prostituta in Carmen's vocabulary of pain. Both described what she'd become in different men's eyes, neither capturing who she'd been or hoped to be again. In the luxury prison of Coral Gables, surrounded by other broken educators, Carmen continued planning impossible escapes while teaching lessons in humiliation. Fluent now in the international language of exploitation that no textbook could prepare anyone to speak.